Hello, I'm David Morris. I've just been travelling through Kazakhstan, which means I've eaten a lot of horse lately. Not usually something that's on the menu for me, but a very interesting place. And it's a country that many people perhaps haven't thought about very much, but it's very large. It's actually the largest landlocked country in the world. It's very importantly positioned next to Russia and China and in the centre of the big Eurasian landmass. It was part of the former Soviet Union and it's trying to find its way in the world. So it has an interesting foreign policy trying to balance between all the partners. It's playing a very important role in China's Belt and Road initiative. And I was having a look at that. I was interviewing people and talking to experts and others and just everyday business people and government officials to understand how China's Belt and Road initiative is viewed in Kazakhstan. It's where China's President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road initiative a decade ago. And if we look at the narratives around the Belt and Road initiative, you know, debt trap and all these sort of scary narratives that we hear, Kazakhstan you would think would be a good case study to take a look at. So I went and had a closer look and investigated some of the projects there. What I found was no evidence of debt, no evidence of debt trap. In fact, the Kazakhs have pretty cleverly funded the new infrastructure largely themselves, or they've attracted a diversity of funds. So their debt to China is small, and so they have maintained a majority control of most of the infrastructure, most of the projects that have been developed over the last decade and more in Kazakhstan to develop its infrastructure. Kazakhstan is a country that actually is very resource rich. It has a lot of potential to develop even faster. It does need to go through the green transition because it's heavily dependent, of course, on oil and fossil fuels. But like Australia, it can make that transition because like my home country of Australia, it's very rich in renewable resources like sunshine as well. It's also a great source of agricultural products. In fact, there's a big American investment there to export beef to China. So the story, when you dig deeper in Kazakhstan, is more complicated than the narrative about the Belt and Road as being all about Chinese power. The Belt and Road offers a country like Kazakhstan connectivity east-west. Now this is something they crave because Kazakhstan has been dependent for so long on Russia. And they're not happy about that dependence. They want to diversify. So growing their trade to China, which is only about 16% of their exports, growing that is wise for Kazakhstan, just as growing their links to Europe and to other markets is also wise. And to do that, they need that connectivity. They need better pipelines, better rail and road connectivity east and west, and China is an important player offering to finance those projects, as of course are other major powers. There is European funding, there's Asian Development Bank funding, there's funding from other international financial institutions, and Kazakhstan is attracting that because it has good quality projects that are going to lead to increased trade that will bring a return. So actually the projects generally have stacked up, with a few exceptions. So there's a very good example in Astana, in the capital city, of a project that failed because of corruption. And this was the rail link that was being built to link the airport to the city, part of the grand plan that they had in Kazakhstan for Astana, to really promote Astana as a major world city. They had a World Expo. I was there a few years ago, about a decade ago now nearly, when they held a World Expo, and they were really developing Astana. It's quite an impressive city, although perhaps it's a bit of a facade as well. That's a debate we could have another time. But Astana was building this rail connection and they attracted Chinese funding for that project. China, perhaps foolishly in this case, provided the funds up front into a vehicle that was going to then develop the project. The funds were provided and they disappeared. Those funds have gone. So classic example of local corruption. The Chinese Government, I think, has learned its lesson, and in all of the research I've done on the Belt and Road Initiative, I have not found other examples where China has done this, where they've provided all the funds up front to a third party. It's just not a wise way of doing business in that part of the world, or probably anywhere actually. So some interesting examples of failure, but also lots of quite interesting and constructive infrastructure projects going on to develop that connectivity, the middle corridor. The reason why the middle corridor linking China with Europe through countries like Kazakhstan is now more and more important is because of the war in Ukraine. The Russian war in Ukraine has diverted and disrupted trade on the northern corridor, and the southern corridor linking China with Europe coming by sea through the Red Sea is of course also being disrupted by conflict in the Middle East. So there's a lot more attention on developing the infrastructure to move goods across the middle corridor. That's not as cost effective in normal times, but these are not normal times. So I think Kazakhstan's an interesting one to watch. People in business and in government tend to be quite positive about building their links with China. Ordinary people, the everyday person in Kazakhstan, on the other hand, is quite suspicious because there's quite a strong anti-China sentiment in Kazakhstan that was encouraged in the old Soviet Union times when the Soviet Union was not very friendly to China, and within the communities of particularly rural Kazakhstan, I was told there are very strong anti-Chinese feelings, lots of rumours that Chinese are coming to steal our wives and all these sorts of things. No evidence for that, I was told by experts on the ground, but still the rumours circulate and the fears of Chinese investment are very strong in Kazakhstan. The evidence seems to be, so far actually, Kazakhstan's doing pretty well, and it's going to need China and other sources of funding, but it's going to need China to help it with the green transformation, because Kazakhstan has to make that shift to be a viable economy in the next generation. Interesting case study to follow, I think, for anyone interested in international finance, international infrastructure, and just foreign policy, because here's a small country in population, 17 million odd people, big land area, so rather like my home country of Australia, but having to balance between the world's big powers. What a challenge that is for Kazakhstan.